I mean, I think there's different levels of ambition as well.
Yeah.
I was very, very ambitious when I was young, and you have to define what is ambition. And I think that's something that's been changing through your life. And he said, we were talking about business. He said, I've done really well in business. I exited my business for a 7-figure sum. And it took me 6 months in therapy to actually understand why I wasn't feeling any happy. So we ended up having this huge portfolio of properties, huge amount of building. And then, of course, we had the property crash in 2008, 2009. And the whole thing took about 2 years to unravel, literally, because the administration took so long, and you start having to go through this whole issue of trying to sort it out, and it was a really tough time. Every single day, life is a roller coaster, so you can be at the top and you can be at the bottom. And the reality behind it is it's about how you get up when you're at the bottom and make sure you recognise and enjoy those times when you're at the top. We're human beings, and our nature is to run away from problems. And the reality is you should run towards them. I just remember being on the ground trying to get up, and I sort of look around and she's lifted my helmet up and said, you know, you're okay. And I'm like, no.
Hi, and welcome to the There's Another Way podcast with me, Adam Halverson.
And me, Pete Dolby. And you've come to the place where each episode we'll be shining a light on authentic people who have chosen an alternative path to their new normal to find another way. Today we have a conversation with Greg Gormley. Greg is a serial entrepreneur who has transcended multiple industries with some epic highs and desperate lows, including a couple of rock bottom moments so deep that he nearly didn't recover from. We'll hear an honest and bare bones account from an inspiring and thought-provoking business mind who sums up grit and resilience in abundance and has come out the other side stronger for his experiences. I hope you enjoy. Great. All right. Well, look, welcome to the There's Another Way podcast. Greg Gormley, it's great to see you here today.
Thank you very much. Love to be here.
Thanks for coming. Bit of sticky traffic on the way up here to rural Buckinghamshire from London.
Yeah, from central London, about an hour and 50, but not too bad, not too bad.
Yeah, but unfortunately that's part of the course, isn't it, these days? But
it is a little bit. Everyone rushing around.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see you here. Thank you so much for coming over to see myself and Adam today. Just to set the scene, we met maybe 18 months or so ago through work. So we've been working together through business for 18 months, doing some really cool stuff together. And I've been thoroughly impressed with what you've been doing as a company and also your story as well. So keen to bring you here to have a chat about some of those bits and find out a bit more and find a bit more information along the way, if that's all right.
Yeah, fantastic. No, I look forward to it.
Brilliant, good stuff. So this is not your first one, are you? You've done other podcasts before, right?
I've done a few podcasts, but so hopefully not too many people have heard it before.
No, that's all good. It's all good. So listen, thank you very much. So I guess to start with, it'd be really good just to understand a little bit about where you grew up and what your aims were as a kid, and what ambitions you had and what direction you were headed in and things like that. Really,
sure.
Where was home for you when you?
So I was actually born in Gloucester, and we lived in Cheltenham. I'm actually from quite a large family as well.
That's right.
I do have 5 brothers and 2 sisters.
Right.
So there's a lot of us.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm number 6.
Right.
And I've my parents were slightly crazy. Had 2 boys, had 2 girls. Most people would probably stop there. 4 kids, that's really good. But no, another 4 boys on top, which is just quite surreal. And I lived the life, and even I look back and think, wow, what a crazy time. But it was a really interesting time. So I was always used to people being around me, being number 6. So I find being alone, it's been something that I've had to teach myself. Whenever I've been travelling and being alone, it's been very odd feeling, but actually it's taken a while to get used to my own company, but now I actually quite enjoy my own company as well.
Wow, so you're used to the chaos. Growing up in a chaotic household, lots of people coming and going all the time.
Very much so, much so.
I should add as well, my brother's got 7 kids, so
of course.
and my best friend now, they're two oldest friends are 2 of 6 as well, so I have some insight, but yeah, it's always interesting diving into those worlds, definitely.
Yeah, well, I definitely think it creates competition.
Yep.
So you're always vying for parents' attention or something, so there's definitely competition between you. My 2 sisters, bless them, I think had to be very tomboyish to mix in with the boys. And so, we used to all play football together, all look out for each other. And it was, to be honest, a really happy childhood. It was a lot of fun. And we looked out for one another a lot, which was really good. So obviously my sisters were very protected by not only the older brothers but also the younger brothers. So I think they had quite a difficult time, probably difficult teenage years. But I was quite young at the time, so it meant no difference to me.
Yeah, it just sounds like your parents had their hands full then. With
very much so, very much so. I think they had a turbulent time. Luckily, by the time they came to me, I think they had sort of relaxed their rules a little bit. They were very, very strict parents, and I think they probably had to be, in all honesty, otherwise you'd have just total carnage. But one trick my dad had, which was really good, he was an amateur boxer in his early days. So he was very, very good, and even now he's 88 and he can still skip and everything else. But we'd all have our own pair of boxing gloves with our name on them. And whenever we became too boisterous, he'd get the boxing gloves out and say, right, okay, come at me. And we'd all fly at him. And if one of us were being a bit too cheeky, he'd just sort of bop us on the nose and make your eyes water a bit so you step back. But it was a great way to sort of get the boys to let off steam and just to sort of keep a bit of discipline there as well.
Brilliant. Did you deploy the same parenting techniques when you became a dad?
No, definitely not. I have 2 girls, so very different, although one of them is probably fairly boisterous like myself, whereas the other one's quite quiet and relaxed, which is quite a nice balance, to be honest.
Yeah, brilliant. So happy childhood, lots of fun Christmases and stuff like that. So what did you know what you wanted to pursue in your career as a child, or had no idea?
I did. I'm one of these really weird, sad people. From the age of 10, and I never deviated. The age of 10, I wanted to be a chartered accountant.
Really?
And I can remember being my first day of senior school, having to write a page about what do you want to be, and I wrote, I want to be a chartered accountant, I want to do this, that and the other. And I went on to become an accountant, and for my sins. So I never actually deviated from that.
Where did that idea come from?
The idea actually came from my dad. He knew I was good at maths. I used to enjoy puzzles, and he said, look, effectively accountancy is a little bit like doing puzzles, jigsaws and competitions, and you earn good money. And I thought, wow, that sounds great, perfect job for me. And I never ever looked at anything else. So whenever anyone was saying to me, oh, I really don't know what to do with my life, I've been really blessed, because actually I think that's quite a challenge for a lot of young people today, not knowing what to do. And it did enable me to direct my studies, although I wasn't the best school student. I tended to have a bit of a disruptive nature in terms of being a bit of a class clown, if you like. So it did cause me a few issues, but I still managed to end up qualifying, which was great.
Brilliant. But I had so many conversations with people, and the general gist is we didn't really know what we wanted to do when we were at school. We drifted along, we fell into this, fell into that. So there are people, I remember, people at school, I think my wife's friend always knew she wanted to be a teacher all the way through, and she's a teacher. So it's really interesting that you do find people that have those ultimate goals, they know what they want, and it helps you achieve it because you know what you're aiming towards. But like you say,
it does have pluses and minuses though, because the minuses are that, speaking to you about your travel when you were younger, it's because you weren't focused on what you wanted to be. So actually you had that tenacity. I didn't bother going to university because I wanted to start earning money.
Yeah.
And so I literally finished my A-levels on the Friday, and on the Monday I was working.
Is that right?
And so I've never had this break of saying, right, I'm going to take 3 months and go travelling or anything else. I've always worked.
Wow, that's really interesting. And do you feel that ever caught up with you at any point? You thought, actually, I'm starting to regret this now because
there is some bit of me that looks at it and thinks perhaps I should have just taken some time out, gone and done some travelling, sort of seen the world a little bit. Although I've now started to do that in my later years, and probably be able to do that in a more comfortable way. Although actually sort of backpacking and doing things like that, I think would have been a good experience. And I think it is character building. So certainly with my children, I look to try and encourage them to go and travel around and look at doing different things.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your circumstances, doesn't it? Because I guess if you went straight from A-levels into school, into work, you've got friends that are still milling around not sure what to do, and you're earning money already and starting your life. It's a good place to be in as well.
I started on the grand sum of £4,200 a year.
Did you?
And I thought it was magical.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, I mean,
Do you feel as well that potentially looking back, being that focused that early may have distracted from other things that could have other directions you could have gone down?
Yeah, possibly. I think I've always had a massive work ethic, and that sort of stems from really being 14 at home and my dad saying in the summer holidays, go and get a job. You're old enough now, and it's sort of more done back then than it is perhaps now. But literally 14, I went and found myself a job in a hotel. I was working 50 hours a week.
Wow.
From 10 a.m. to 8 p.m, 5 days a week, and I was 14.
Yeah.
And I did that. That became my weekend job as well. So I was doing my summer job, weekend job. So all I've done is work, and that's all that's taught me. And that's why I have this mentality today of working so hard.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said about your dad, because he obviously saw that in you, and it doesn't sound like he forced you into going down that route. It's almost like he suggested, look, you've got the maths ability, why don't you try this? And you concurred, and off you went down that path.
Yeah, I think my parents have been very relaxed in terms of what my siblings have done and wanted to do with their lives, and they've done lots of different things. So there's been no one direct direction that they've wanted to go in. So from that perspective, it's been quite nice, where it's been an open blank book, and I've sort of filled in the pages myself, which has been great.
So would you say the sort of theme from your parents was really more around sort of discipline in what you do, as opposed to, as in go and do it and work hard at it, regardless of what it is, was more the message?
Yeah, I think so. And certainly being number 6, I think by the time it got to me, they were pretty tired. And so I just used to do my own thing. So in terms of my schooling, parents' evenings, going on school trips or anything, it was all down to me to arrange and sort and everything else, which is probably quite good in a way, rather than being spoon-fed.
100%.
And I think in this day and age, we do spoon-feed our children a huge amount and try and cover for them so much, when in reality, we should probably actually take a step back, let them try it out for themselves, and if it fails, be there to help them pick up.
Yeah, completely agree.
We see that a lot. I mean, I remember as a child, but obviously no mobile phones, but you were out and about with your friends, discovering, exploring. As long as you're back before dark, before nightfall, it didn't really matter, and you had a lot more independence. And I think you're right. I think you can see that in the workplace as well. I think there's a younger generation of people who maybe expect to be handed things at work in the work environment as well, rather than be more proactive. I think you kind of see that coming through now.
Very much so, and I think it's effectively, what do I need to do now? And you want them to explore and work it out for themselves, and quite often they'll just be sat there dumbfounded. And I do think it is partly to do with the way that they really have their upbringing, of which is mainly in front of a phone, and the social media element is a huge pressure. I think being a youngster today is quite difficult. It's much harder than it was when we were younger. I think the peer pressure is very, very huge. You're constantly available to be attacked, and I think there is this thing that we will start regulating social media later in years, because we'll do all these surveys of actually the damage it's done from a mental health perspective, and realise that we shouldn't have let it be so rampant. And the fact that you can message people and say anything online and there's nothing that can be done about it, and you're just hiding under a keyboard warrior status, I think shocking, really. Yeah,
I completely agree. It's a real minefield, and I having young kids myself, I battle with this notion a lot. Don't know what the answer is, But yeah, it's really complex challenge, isn't it? And I think you're right. Until they come out the other side, and maybe when they're of an age when they can influence some of these policies and things, maybe that will then make the difference. But it's really hard. Having said that, I do remember my mum saying the same to me. Oh, I don't envy you coming up into the world today. With the 5 television channels we had or whatever it was. So
but I think what we had was a sort of a release away from Snapchat, for example, where you know we had the time to be able to sort of focus on other stuff. I think now, I read part of a really interesting book, Gabor Mate, who I bang on about all the time, where his sort of philosophy is that actually kids are bringing each other up now because they're at school all day, together all evening. That actually they're sort of, they're not really forming their own impression of the world. It's all about what's around them. And I think, I remember, being 13, 14 when, all of that great music was coming out in the 90s, and showing my age, but, tinkering with speakers and, music equipment and stuff like that. Whereas I think now even, not to give my daughter a hard time, but, you have to say, look, get off now, rather than that natural, I think it stops that natural inquisitiveness of sort of life, I think.
Yeah. Well, if we wanted to find anything out, it would be an effort, but you'd actually go and do it. Whereas now, the internet, you want to find anything.
Yeah,
it's on your phone and within a few seconds.
Yeah.
But today we're in this world where we've never been so connected, and yet really we are the most unconnected.
Yeah.
And as individuals, I look at the kids today, and I do feel that there is a lot of them that suffer from mental illness. There is the issues of feeling lonely, and then the issues as well of having to live up to their peers. And I think it's a real pressure, and it's sad.
Interestingly, we've got a guy coming on in a few weeks' time who is a psychologist, and he said the biggest problem he deals with at the moment is generalised anxiety or disorder, because people are bombarded with messaging, aren't they? From purporting amazing lifestyles that aren't a reality of the actual lifestyles they're leading. But if you're a young, malleable mind, then you don't know, you don't have a wealth of experience behind you to make a judgment call on that. You see what you see is what you think is happening. So
I mean, I think there's different levels of ambition as well. I was very, very ambitious when I was young, and you have to define what is ambition. And I think that's something that's been changing through your life. Yeah. And when you're younger, you do think, oh yeah, it's going to be a Ferrari, it's going to be a big car, it's going to be houses all over the world, it's going to be all sorts of things. And quite often it just comes down to pure material possessions. And if you read any books and look at any sort of documentaries, and I was at an event the other week, like last week, where this one guy stood up, and he said, we were talking about business. He said, I've done really well in business. I exited my business for a 7-figure sum. And it took me 6 months in therapy to actually understand why I wasn't feeling any happy. He said, I felt no difference whatsoever. And yet I had all these millions in the bank, and it didn't make me happy. So it took me 6 months in therapy to figure that out.
Wow. And
this is why sometimes you look at the richest of the world, and they do these philanthropic gestures, and really they're doing it for them.
Yeah.
Because the reality behind it is they do want to see that return of investment, and they're businessmen and they want to see it spent wisely, but they do want to have that feel-good factor of, okay, I've been really successful and I'm actually giving something back. Yeah. And yes, they are doing good for other people, but ultimately it does come back to them feeling good about themselves that, oh wow, I've done that.
Yeah.
And I think that should happen throughout our lives, whereby even if you've spent £1, you should have that feeling of, oh, I've done something good with that. And if you've donated to a good cause or something. And that, for me, is an important aspect as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I just wonder how many people in this world have that ambition to have that goal of putting all the money in the bank or the material possessions, then they get there and it's just a soulless. Or you hear these stories of people that just give away millions of pounds because they either can't handle it or that's not what they thought it would be.
The thing like the lottery. So in reality, if you go and win the Euro Millions and win 100 million, it will destroy your life. Yeah. Most people will not be able to handle that. Yeah. So actually be careful what you wish for because you might just get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you read many stories of. I remember in the early days of the lottery when someone won 70 million, and it destroyed their lives.
Yeah. I think I remember the same.
They didn't know where they fit because their friends that they had expected them to pay for everything. So in the end, they ended up falling out with them. They then wanted to fit in with the elite, but the elite sort of shunned them because it's like, well, you've just won the lottery and it's just new money and ich. And they just became very lost. And then, they then separated as well. And it just destroys lives. Yeah. It was really amazing.
Well, I think obviously there has to be purpose behind. Money, I guess, is a necessity. Some would argue an evil one, some wouldn't, but, whatever your perception of it is. But I don't think it's a surprise to me that all those stories you hear about lottery winners, because there's so much happiness that seems to be attached to it. And I'm baffled that as a society, we still don't seem to learn, the societal conditioning, the competition, the status games. And, I'm amazed even in school that we're not taught to have a better relationship with money. It just it baffles me.
Unbelievable. I do not get that. That's a massive thing that's missing in all schools. Both my children have left school, and I try and talk to them about a mortgage, your credit file, borrowing money on credit cards, APR, all of this, and they don't get it. They haven't been taught anything. So no life skills. I mean, your credit file is so important to you, and you can mess it up so easily, and things like that should definitely be taught as life skills. And they are life skills, and it's like, how should I manage my bank account? How should I budget? I've got two girls that are very, very different. One's at university, and she has been amazing at budgeting. She's so self-sufficient. She's found herself her house. She's done it all herself, which has been brilliant. And then the other one is really, really smart and savvy in terms of knows how to rustle and get money and work, but budgeting is an alien concept. And not that she comes and asks me for anything, but she has her own money, but ultimately she finds it really difficult to budget. And I think it's a good lesson to learn as when you're younger. I mean, I struggled. I did stupid things when I was really young. I passed my driving test, bought a really expensive car that I couldn't afford, that was far too powerful for me, that I then went and smashed up. I didn't have the insurance, so it then put me into debt. And it's stupid things like that you do. And, again, that was an accident that I could have died from, but luckily I didn't.
It sounds like a cat with 9 lives. But it does make you wonder, the sceptical side of me, cynical side of me, is whether it's intentional that they don't include that as part of the curriculum in terms of managing finances. But who knows? But just back on to where you were before, Greg. So you went in to be a chartered accountant at the age of, 18?
Yeah, so I started at 18. I then ended up qualifying when I was about 24. Passed all my exams, which was an interesting time. It was quite arduous, to say the least. And I was working at the same time. I was
going to say, so you're working.
Working at the same time. You did get study leave, and certainly before the exams you had a couple of weeks to sort of revise, but they are quite tough. There was a few failed exams, which is really frustrating because you have to retake them in sets and what have you. But when I ultimately qualified, it was great. And, being that age was saying, right, I can do something exciting in my life. It's my goals, dream. And actually, that's one event that I do look back and feeling elated. And I did feel different because I didn't have to study anymore. It meant that I had a lot more free time, and it meant that I could start looking at options in terms of what did I want to do with my career. So that actually was a moment in time that I look at and think, actually, it was worth all the stress and the strain. And there was a point of difference once I'd had that qualification. And then from there, I landed a job with News Corporation, which was a really interesting time. So the company was NDS, and it dealt with all the technology behind Sky. So it did the programming for Sky, all the Sky cards. Same for Foxtel in Australia, and then DirecTV in the States. So we had clients that were global, and it was a really interesting company that was owned by News Corporation.
And that permitted you to travel, didn't it, to different parts of the world?
So that permitted a little bit of travel. So I used to fly over to Israel, where we had a huge R&D centre. And then from there, I'd go and evaluate projects and come back with recommendations saying, yes, I think it's worth spending more money, or no, we should can it. And from that point of view, I came across amazing technology. So I remember going over to see this one piece of technology called XTV, and it stood for extended television, and that became Sky Plus. And so things like that
Wow.
being involved in was really, really fascinating. And the technology that we had behind the programming of those smart cards was so complex, and we had these amazing data scientists and scientists on board. And I can remember them talking about accountancy, and they thought I was the clever one, which was really interesting.
But so I guess what it sounds like is almost you were really there in a capacity to sort of calculate ROI, sort of really crunch the numbers in terms of this is viable going forwards.
Yeah, I was really lucky there, actually. They looked after me really well. So I had a number of different roles over my 7 years. And probably one of the most interesting parts was when we were floating the business on NASDAQ. And we were working with Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. I think it's changed now, but MSDW were our brokers at the time, and they came to us and said the business is worth this. It's a lot of money, hundreds of millions, but because you're half product and half software, your valuation's being kept down. So what we recommend is you sell your product division and float your software. So this was approved by basically News Corp board, and but we had to keep it quiet. So no one was actually allowed to know about it. So effectively we went around looking to sell this product division. So I was one of the team that did that. I ended up flying a lot to Norway, and we ended up selling the products division to Tandberg Television, and then we floated the company, but we had to do that on a simultaneous timescale.
Wow. So
it was a really interesting, challenging time. So selling half the business, so people kept coming saying, "Oh, how's it all going?" And you go, "Oh, yeah, it's fine. We're selling you soon," but you can't say anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then floating the business on NASDAQ, and we floated for billions and then flew up. This was in like 99, 2000, and the share price flew up. Floated at $20, and I think we hit 110 at one point.
Wow.
And then came crashing back down along with everyone else. So
Right.
Amazing times. And I look back at that time being really fondly, some really smart people that I met there, and I'm still in touch with a few of them today. And then my CFO, whose job I really wanted, wasn't going anywhere soon. So I ended up being headhunted for another NASDAQ listed company called CME, which was mainly an operator of TV stations across Eastern Europe. So I used to travel to Serbia, Croatia, Slovakia, Slovenia, Ukraine, Romania, Czech Republic, and I think there was one other. I think there was 8 TV stations in all. So every 2 months, be going back to the TV station and working closely with the CFO in each TV station that was an English guy or girl, and then effectively looking at their programming, but also making sure that the locals, to run a media license, you must be domiciled from that country. So we had these 50-50 joint ventures. So it was a really interesting business that you really had to get under the hood of. And that was a great time. But travelling every week does sort of start taking its toll. It sounds really exciting to start with, and you get really excited, but I promise you after 3 months.
Yeah. And you mentioned your daughters at the beginning were trying to work out the timelines, but did you have kids already by this point?
Yeah, so I had my first, and then the second had arrived as well whilst working there.
Yeah.
So that became difficult. So there were times when I was absent.
Yeah.
And you can't fill those times back.
I know.
And I remember there's this video of my daughters playing at this birthday party, and there's some of my friends there taking the mick going, "Oh, where's Greg? Greg?
Oh, no,
Greg?"
really?
And it's because it was pretty standardised.
Yeah.
So, after a period of time, I thought, no, I need to leave this and just be around a little bit more. Although the thought process sounded good, but the practicality wasn't, because I then went and worked for myself, and anyone that knows working for yourself, you put in just as many hours.
Yeah.
So actually it still sort of aligned with my work ethic, and I still did the sort of 6 days a week and working a lot, etc.
And just to sort of dig into that decision process a bit more, because I think from my own perspective, similar story, lots of travel, at what I felt was a very crucial age, and I felt I was trying to be this in my job but this at home, and I think, as you probably found out, it's impossible to do both.
It is.
and actually that really started to tear at me. You know, do you feel, was there any, you know, did you have any resentment about having, you know, because obviously it sounded like you enjoyed the job.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a real mixed bag of emotions.
It is. I mean, it was a great job. To be honest, they looked after me so well. I mean, I was so well looked after. Whenever you're flying, you're always flying in business class. You're picked up.
I didn't get that.
You're looked after. My expenses that I could spend on going out were significant.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful job, and I look back at it very fondly. But I left at, I think, the right time. My girls were still fairly young. I didn't want to be a weekend dad. I wanted to be around more. And, you know, and the other thing about flying is it does actually make you quite tired.
Yeah,
so
it does.
at the weekend you're there and you're sort of there, but not fully there. So
You're probably already dreading the next flight on the Monday morning to go to the next destination.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you do look at and you think, you know, it's really for a short period of time, and it's probably really for a guy that's younger and probably single. So things like that, I think, didn't sort of align. And then I left that sort of around 2004, 2005, and started my own business in property with a couple of my brothers.
Right,
So
okay.
That
So-
was an interesting time.
So that was the first deviation away from the chartered accountancy into a different business. Because I was thinking you started to get some exposure to the software business. You said when you split out the
Yeah,
business,
certainly
but-
with News Corporation there was
Yeah.
a huge amount of software exposure, and then with CME that was really looking at operations in a lot of detail, which is really quite exciting. You're speaking to people like Disney and looking at 10-year programming rights, etc. So things like that I think were fascinating. And then from there, deviating away. I think one of the things that I felt was that I didn't actually produce or make anything. There was no end product. And that was always something that grated on me a little bit. I couldn't see value in terms of what I had done. And so one of my brothers is a builder anyway. My other brother had exited from the corporate life as well, who's very practical with his hands. And then we just decided to get together and set up a building company.
And you had the numbers, I guess.
And I had the numbers and sort of contacts. So in 2005, we started building houses, blocks of flats, housing developments, and we grew really fast, far too fast, if I'm really honest.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
That must have been exciting after wanting to get out of the travel and, you know, do some things.
Yeah, it was. And, you know, building a block of flats is actually really interesting, and seeing it go up and visiting it every week and seeing the difference, and then the whole sales process, and there's a whole sort of thing in between, making sure things are working properly. It was a really interesting time, and we were really successful about it and did a lot of properties. But we probably were trying to go too quick. And if I'm sort of critical of myself, you know, one of my brothers in particular, he's very, very sort of just wants to get things done. And he's the youngest, and he's the one that's there pushing all the time.
Yeah.
And we ended up having this huge portfolio of properties, huge amount of building. And then, of course, we had the property crash in 2008, 2009. It was sort of November 2008 when it really, really kicked in.
Yeah. And were those the developments that you were working on at the time, were they local to where you live so you could spend more time at home, or were they
No.
no, okay.
Just to make it difficult.
Right.
So I lived in Surrey and travelled down to Bournemouth, where we were developing mainly around the Bournemouth area.
Right, okay.
So,
okay. Interesting.
So drove up and down the M3 a fair bit.
I meant to ask you earlier on, you mentioned about how you knew from 10 what you wanted to go into chartered accounting. Did your siblings have a similar
No,
no,
none of them did.
Okay.
Very, very different to me.
Right.
Very, very. We're all really different. We sort of have similar sort of traits, but different sort of attitudes to life. But interesting.
Brilliant. And then after the property business, the crash happened in 2008, 2009, and then what happened after?
And sorry, just before that, because I got told a piece of advice about growing too fast. It's been very, very front of my mind in my business. Yeah. And obviously, before you go into it, I remember I was talking to the CEO of still a very successful company, he's a close family friend, but he somehow knew at the time just to stagger things. And I just remember, I think I must have been 17, 18. I just said, I don't understand that. Can you tell me what you mean? Because most people think if you land the business, that's all that matters. You'll figure it out. So could you just elaborate a little bit on the growing too fast?
Yeah, very much so. It's interesting because you look at history and there are very successful businesses, and they actually go bankrupt because they're so successful. Cash is king is an adage that is around, and it will always be around because it is. And if you grow too fast, the cash demands on you can actually just cut your legs off, and then suddenly the business isn't there because you can't support it. Now, what happened to us is that we had a number of sites being built. We also had a number of sites in planning. We had bought a number of properties on buy-to-let mortgages which we're renting out to convert, then knock down and put into planning. So we had three sorts of elements. And with things like the interest rate rising, that caused an issue and shortfall on the rentals. With the planning was getting worse and worse, but just more difficult, so that became slower. And then finally, the actual sites being built, we had a lot of borrowing through Kaupthing Bank, which was the Icelandic bank, which unfortunately went bust. So suddenly you're trying to finish these developments, the bank that you've been building these developments with go bust. The administrators came into Kaupthing and they were drawing, I think it was something like £1 million a week. And they just they were not focused on either splitting the book and selling it quickly, dealing with the book properly. Personally, I think they did a very poor job. They just took a huge amount of money. And what that meant for people like myself is, although we had terms whereby we could draw money, so you might have 5.5 million borrowing on this site that's allowed, of which we'd drawn 3, another 2.5 million to draw. And don't forget, in stages when you're building, in a month you could have something like 250 to 300,000 in a month to draw down to pay all your contractors. And of course, 2 months go by and suddenly you're 2 months behind, and just one site alone, that's £500,000 you owe people. The bank aren't doing anything. You can't just take it and refinance because no one was refinancing. And then you multiply it by 3 sites and it's like, whoa. And then you've got contractors that are really unhappy, and I don't blame them, to be honest. And then they're taking their workforce off site, they're taking their materials off site, and then suddenly you're in this total situation where you're just stuck. And it's horrendous. And so, you look at it and think, wow, that was a really tough time. And when people say, I don't know where to turn, I really understand that, because it became a really low point in my life where you just wake up and you just don't know what to do. You just literally did not know what to do, because the administrators were saying, well, these bank loans, if you look at clause 1, repairable on demand. But hang on a minute, you're developing a project that takes like 12 to 15 months to develop and then sell. How can you do this? And then with the property crash, in the addition to that, suddenly properties in the Bournemouth area, for example, had dropped by 35%. Now, the way that I say that we were going too quick was we were doing lots of deals, so we didn't mind a lower margin. So we were making sort of less than 20% on a property, so we'd leverage quite highly and have complicated structures. So we'd have a bit of mezzanine finance on top just so we could do more. And that's what actually killed us, because the property market dropped 35%, but we're only making 20. So suddenly we're making losses and we couldn't sustain it. And so we came in this total sort of whirlwind of just chaos, of just not knowing what to do. And it became really, really hard. And, you didn't want to let people down, but at the same time you couldn't pay them. You didn't have the money. And the whole thing took about 2 years to unravel, literally, because the administrators took so long, and you start having to go through this whole issue of trying to sort it out. And it was a really tough time, I
have to admit, I really empathise with that, because it's, especially over a prolonged period where I guess every day you're waking up. I'm imagining sleepless nights as well. I guess, without dwelling on the pain of it too much, are you able to look back and look at the positives of that experience, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think the reality behind it is, whatever happens in life, there is always people that are worse off than you. First of all, just to be born in this country, you're in the top 1% of the world, so you have to try and keep some form of reality. However, when you're in that situation, I can remember feeling really low. And when you get low, you do have suicidal thoughts, and there was definitely probably a 3-4 month period where I believe that if I had not had children, I would not be here today.
Wow.
God.
And the reality behind it is, and the only way I can describe it, and this may resonate with people going through tough times at the moment, is when you wake up, it is literally as though there is an elephant sat on your chest, and you have to even concentrate to take breath. And just to breathe seemed difficult, let alone to operate and manage and try and work out some resolution. And it was very, very painful time. And I think if I had that time again, I would do things very differently. I think you try and delay the inevitable. So that's why it became 2 years. We should have either cut the losses, gone to the administrators and say, right, okay, you can either have the keys or you either support us, and just be a lot more bullish about it.
Yeah.
Because that took 2 years to sort, which caused massive, massive issues all across, from work and family life as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I guess also there was an element where you probably wanted to try and protect people around you. You know, did you let it off? For example, I hope it's not too personal a question, but were kids, wife, were they aware of how serious it was?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah, it had to do a whole change in terms of your life, taking kids out of private school, doing all sorts of things. So it became really, really problematic and very difficult time. And
And probably not as much support in those days for being in that situation to help you get out of it as maybe there is today as well, right?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And you sort of ended up going round in circles trying to talk to people, and ultimately, if you've got a contractor that's owed a lot of money, they don't want to hear excuses. They just want to know, when am I going to be paid?
Yeah.
And you can put them in touch with the administrators, but the administrator's saying, oh, we won't speak to you. We'll only talk to the company. And then we're speaking to the administrators and they're going, well, we're sorting it. And no, we're not going to lend you any more money at the moment. I know you have these terms, but we don't know. We're not going to put more money in because we know the properties aren't going to be worth what they were. So the numbers don't work. And it became this just spiral. And it was quite a despairing time.
I can imagine. But I guess there's so many personal challenges. I'm sure, I'm just trying to put myself in that situation. If I'm having challenges in my current business, which I think everybody who runs a business has. I guess there's probably a sense of failure. I can just imagine, why did I do that, or why? Yeah. But I guess the really harsh thing about that situation is actually you probably did a bit right, but you had such a severe global event that you could never have forecasted.
Yeah, and banks don't go bust that often.
No,
so it was a sort of compounded effect on so many things. And I think that the most important thing is in terms of running your own business and being an entrepreneur is being able to dust yourself down and get back up and go again. And that is the hardest thing. And hold your head high because you did your best. As long as you've done your best, and you hear some of the stories around that time where people just burrowed money away and everything else, and literally I ended up with nothing. I had nothing.
Yeah. I think it's a really great message about that resilience, about getting back up again, because everyone's going to have that point in their lives where they feel knocked over. But
it's called a black swan. Yeah. So at the end of the day, there are events in your life that will happen. Yeah. And I'll never forget reading about the H&M family where they had the perfect life. They just bought thousands of acres in Scotland, billionaires, and their children were on holiday and they got murdered in I think one of the massacres over in, I think it was in Thailand or somewhere like that. And and it's like they have this perfect life, but they don't. And the reality is, things happen to people every single day. Life is a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So you can be at the top and you can be at the bottom.
Yeah.
And the reality behind it is, it's about how you get up when you're at the bottom and make sure you recognise and enjoy those times when you're at the top.
Yeah.
And that for me is how you can sum up life, and making sure that, you know, you look for those around you that are at those bottom points and help them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you're there, you do want help.
Yeah.
And that for me is an important thing to provide.
Massively. And was there a point at which during that difficult time you thought there was a chink of light and you could see you were coming out of it the other side, or was there anyone that helped you in that scenario, or was there a turning point where you thought, I think we might be okay, we might get through this? Or
No.
Right.
In short,
Wow.
I mean, literally, it became a really difficult time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And the chink of light started to happen. I mean, we're talking about 2008. Really, it took until 2011 before any light showed. And it was a long time in coming. And then, because you lose your confidence, and you lose the whole ability to operate and function properly. And so for me, 2011 was a pivotal year where I thought, right, okay, you know, everything's happened. You just have to move on and deal with it. And at the time, you know, I turned 40, pretty much lost everything. And it was like, right, I need to try and start again. And what do I do? And so, you know, you start building that up, and it just takes time. And you have to be patient with yourself. And you can't berate yourself saying, why isn't this quicker?
Yeah.
Why isn't this quicker? And the reality is, things do take time, especially when you're starting from scratch. And for me, looking back, I think, yeah, it did take time, took a while, but ultimately it was a good lesson to learn. You know, you should evaluate your scenario, evaluate your situation. Don't push things too far. It's good to have ambition and good to grow, but, you know, try and do it with some balance.
Yeah.
And you know, have a plan B maybe as well.
I think the biggest takeaway I've taken from that story, like you said, is in hindsight, you would have dealt with the problem earlier.
Yeah.
I think talking about anxiety, I really think it's a very simplistic way of looking at it. But I think often people suffer from anxiety because they're not running at the problem that they need to tackle. They're not taking things head on. And it's that avoidance of that pain that I think creates the anxiety that we're in.
I agree.
And again, I know this. Sorry, I keep feel like I'm turning on myself, but just what you're saying resonates so much. You know, I almost have to sometimes wake up and just be like, right, what is the first problem that I'm avoiding, or like, what do I need to run at, and be really honest with myself about. In so many different ways, and I don't think people do that.
No, we're human beings, and our nature is to run away from problems.
Yeah.
And the reality is, you should run towards them, because you embrace them and bring them on board. And I think from my point of view, that's something that I've learned, where, you know, things like conflict, confrontation, just enter into it, because actually what happens is it's not bad as what you think.
Yeah.
And the thought process in your head is going to be worse than actually the end result. So go and face those problems, you know, just hit them head on. It doesn't matter how hard they seem to be, just go at them, because the reality behind it is they're probably not going to be as bad as what you imagine.
Yeah.
It's The Power of Now, right? What an impactful book that is. How many people spend too much time in the past or too much time in the future generating anxiety, or in the past, depression? Focus on the now.
Yeah.
I've seen it before. If you're on a beautiful train ride or wherever out in the nature, and there's people on their phones, they're just missing everything. They're just not present. It's so frustrating. But I mean, I certainly didn't have the same amount of problems as you. I've been through depression. It was terrible. I had it in my early 20s.
Yeah.
I felt that elephant. I even opened the curtains. I used to get so frustrated with myself. I used to waste so much energy. And why am I feeling like this? And I couldn't see anyone. I was just paralysed by anxiety. Yeah. It was terrible. So
I think that's a good word, paralysed.
Yeah.
That is literally how you feel.
Yeah.
You are this deer in the headlights, and you just do not know what to do. And it's really hard. And I think probably most people in their life will go through some form of depression. It's just something, you know, we are human beings at the end of the day. We get affected from internal and external factors. And we should not be embarrassed about it. I think mental health is talked about a lot more now, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
And I think it's also looking out for one another. I think it really is important, because you can actually make that difference.
And also coming out the other side of it as well. I mean, what you went through must have been horrendous, because it's 2 or 3 years of not knowing where to turn and how to affect things and make a difference. But I can't remember whether you listened to this podcast or not the other day, and it was talking about how everyone goes through difficulties, and you almost have to go through. When you look back in your life, you come out the other side of it stronger for when you went in there. And sometimes the toughest path is the best path to take, and makes you who you are today. Yeah. And I think there's a tendency for some parents to shield their kids from all of that stuff, and they come out the other side, they don't know what to do when they hit the real world.
Yeah.
And it's
definitely.
I wouldn't wish that upon anyone, but I think when you look back on things that have happened in your life, you can turn it into a positive, I think.
Oh, definitely. I think the saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, is very, very true.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I think there are a lot of children that are sort of protected, so much so that when they do enter the world, they don't get it. Yeah. And I think it's a shame.
And it flips the other way.
And it flips the other way, exactly.
As in, you think that protection is going to help them, but it's the actual complete opposite.
Yeah. It's actually a negative for them.
Absolutely. And if you don't, like Pete sort of touched on it before, but if you don't mind as well, because it sounds like the situation was probably at one point pretty dire. How did you manage your way out of it? Because I think, for me, if someone could hear, that if you can get into a position where you're dealing with those sums of money, or that sort of level of sums of money, administrators are involved. First of all, I hope this doesn't come across in any way patronising, but well done for getting out of it. Yeah. Because that, I can't empathise with it, but I can. Do you know what I mean? In like, and again, all I can sit there and say is all you were trying to do was build a great business.
Yeah.
And then all that ended up happening is you had to deal. So I'm actually a bit emotional about it. You had to deal with that, with all of your best intentions, hard work, and then that's what you had to deal with. So I guess, was there, how would you say you did get your way out of it?
Actually, my qualification as accountant did actually help and came in because I had that to fall back on. So I started speaking to sort of friends, just saying, look, I'm trying to get back in the game. Effectively, do you have any businesses that need a financial health check, an overview, a review? And then I started to sort of build up my network from there. And just my focus was really looking at SME businesses and taking my experience of large companies, taking their operational, good corporate governance, how they grow, and then sort of raising money. How can we move that forward? So I started working on a consulting basis for different businesses, just helping them, and that really got me back on my feet. And it built my confidence back up because I was actually genuinely helping these businesses, and they were really thankful, because quite often in a business you get to a stage and it's like, right, I don't know how to get to the next stage, and I don't know how to contain what I'm doing. And so I think that's what helped. And by people saying thank you, that you realise that you do have value, and that actually you are giving something back positive, and it isn't just a financial thing.
And I think that's a really interesting thing, isn't it, about failure, is the attachment of failure with ego, self-perception. And again, I don't mean ego in a negative sense. It's that self-perception, that self-value, which again, I think is then what drives the despair sort of feeling. And I can imagine, was there sort of a difficult period trying to almost artificially rebuild your confidence off the back of an experience like that?
Very much so. And I think I can remember attending an event and, classic imposter syndrome, and you're there thinking, oh my God, I've got this background where I've done this. And then you think, actually, well, no, you're absolutely right, because all I was trying to do was build a really good business, and we had been massively successful and made a lot of money on paper. And then, to turn around and say, right, okay, let's build this back up, and let's take the approach of solidifying a foundation and doing it perhaps a bit more slowly, getting a different number of customers on board and clients and helping them, and then building it up from there. So that was sort of 2011 to 2013. And then in 2014, I founded my first sort of real startup of my own, which was really interesting.
And which one was that, Greg?
So that startup's called Bink.
Okay.
And that's very much about linking loyalty to payment. So instead of carrying around your Boots card, Tesco Club card, or your phone and having to get an app out, etc., you would just register the card with our app, and then effectively when you use the card, it recognises the loyalty ID and pass that back to the retailer in real time. So we looked at getting deals with Visa, MasterCard and Amex and had a really interesting time. But it was an amazing time whereby we raised a lot of money very quickly in a short space of time and had huge amounts of belief from a lot of people, which was really exciting. And we got our deals with Visa, MasterCard, Amex. In our naivety, we were knocking on the doors of these Goliaths saying, oh, we want to do these things. And eventually we got them over the line, which was great. And it's sort of been an interesting journey. The sort of tough side on it was the revenue side. Just trying to switch revenues on was really difficult because we're focused on some of the larger businesses and their tech stacks were slow. But it was an amazing thing to do from scratch, that we actually created something and got massive buy-in from a lot of people, which was fantastic.
And how was that born though? What was that your vision, or did you meet someone? Because
So
you've gone from property, you've gone, the chartered accountancy, and then suddenly you're in the tech business. Who did you meet that helped you?
I met a chap called Lee Clark, and bizarrely I met him in the gym, and he had this idea, and it all stemmed from his wife being in a Boots, and they were going on holiday, and she was spending £300, and they said, oh, have you got your Boots Advantage card? And she's like, oh no, it's my other handbag. And he's like, why should it be so difficult to get a simple thank you from a retailer when I've just shopped with you and spent a lot of money? Surely it should be an easier way. So we started talking about the idea and then said, well, let's see if we can do it. And it went from there. So we formed Bink, which was raised quite a lot of money. And so I was there, and that became my passion. And again, working loads of hours, lots of days, 6-7 days a week. So we could build it up and built it up over a period of time, which was really interesting.
How did you build the product?
So we ended up raising quite a lot of money, and we had a whole load of tech engineers. You actually took front end, back end.
You got staff in house.
Everything in house. We grew it to like at one point there was 60 people when I was still there, and but 22nd of June 2018, a lot changed.
Right. Yeah. And what was that happened on that day? Talk us through that day.
So it was a beautiful summer's day. It was a Friday, and the weather was glorious. It was just one of our beautiful summer days. And I had to go into London for I think it was like a 5 p.m. meeting. So I thought, right, I won't go in. I had a motorbike at the time that I'd been driving, and I'd been riding it for 7 years, not every day, but it was there. If I ever went to London, I normally went on my bike, just because I could literally go from the offices in Ascot into Mayfair, and it would take me 50 minutes maximum.
Especially on a nice day as well.
Especially on a nice day. Yeah. So, well, I was actually being cautious for once, and I thought, you know what, it's Friday, it's a nice day, there's got a lot of people out and about. I won't take my motorbike into town. I'll go by train. So, right, sensible, which is not really a word associated with me. So I was riding to the train station, which was only 5 miles, and I was riding through Chobham, which is a lovely little Surrey village, and then you just go through Chobham to Woking, and there's this road that's a 50 mile an hour sort of country road, single lane each way, and I was riding my motorbike down this road, which I'd ridden many times, and I was going along 50 miles an hour, a lady coming in the opposite direction. She sat there with her right indicator on. So she sat there stationary, and I'm coming towards her. I've got no cars around me or anything else, and I'm doing 50 miles an hour. And just as I get towards her, she just suddenly turned. And it was like, I can remember just going, whoa! And literally she turned, and I hit her at the sort of 50 miles an hour. I did actually meet up with her afterwards and find out exactly what happened, but I'll talk about that in a second. But I just remember being on the ground trying to get up, and I sort of look around, and she's lifted my helmet up and said, you know, you were okay? And I'm like, no. And basically what transpired was, obviously the ambulance were called, the police were called. It caused about a 4-hour delay all around Chobham. It was in the papers. The ambulance arrived and said, look, we need you to get to the hospital. We're not going to get you there in time. So a helicopter came. So a helicopter landed. I was on the deck. I had morphine on the deck. I had a number of injuries, and they just stabilised me and waited for the helicopter to land, which landed in a nearby field. And then
were you conscious at this point?
So yeah, I'm sort of conscious. I'm in quite a lot of pain, and they're sort of trying to talk to me and saying, right, we're going to do this. There's a helicopter coming. We've given you morphine, and we're going to get you out of here as soon as possible. I'm cut out of all my clothes, so I'm just sort of there. My arms pretty bad. My knees smashed to bits and sort of ripped apart. My shoulders shattered. My face is broken, even though I had a very expensive full face helmet on. And basically what transpired is when she'd turned into me, I had nearly gone into her passenger door where her son was. And luckily I'd managed to just shift my front wheel enough that the front wheel hit her front wheel and buckled her wheel under the car. My bike sort of went under her car and flew me over. As I flew over the car, the sort of metal truncated up and ripped my knee off. So it spun me in the air. So I landed on one arm, which basically snapped. And then the rest of the impact was then on my shoulder and then face. So I ended up having a fractured eye socket, broken nose. So there was quite a lot of injuries, and they were just trying to get me to hospital. They weren't sure if I had bad internal injuries. So the police arrived. The poor woman, the weirdest thing was her house was literally there. She was turning pretty much into her house. And the sad story about it was that her son, she had been at Tooting Hospital all day because her son's got MS. So she was just tired and had spent the whole day in hospital and ended up sending me there via helicopter.
Wow.
So on the positive side, it did 2 of my bucket list. I got a free helicopter ride and I ended up appearing on 24 Hours at A&E. So
the last thing you wanted to greet you at the hospital when you got there was the film crew, right?
Well, it's interesting how they operate that. So 24 Hours at A&E, what they do is they've put in like 200 cameras throughout A&E, and they're filming 24/7 for a month. And then they go through and find the interesting stories, and then they approach you afterwards if you're happy for you to be included in an episode. So, and the reason that I was happy to do it was I can remember being lifted into the helicopter, and I was still in quite a lot of pain. And they said, "Are you okay? Are you still struggling with pain a bit?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm in agony." So they said, "Don't worry, we'll give you some ketamine." So I can remember them giving me ketamine, and wow, it just floated away. And
you flew to the hospital on your own.
Yeah, literally. And so I wanted to know what had happened from the moment I'd landed, and what had happened, because all I remember is sort of coming round in my hospital bed, sort of Friday at about 7 o'clock, where they'd sort of stabilised me.
The next day?
No, this was that night. So they'd stabilised me and worked out what they wanted to do. And what transpires from watching the 24 Hours at A&E is I'd landed on the top of the hospital. They take me on a stretcher straight into an MRI, full body scan, and there is a team of about 7 people running around looking at my brain, looking at my back, looking at internal organs. And they said, right, here's the problems. This is what we have to deal with. And so what they turned around and said, right, was we'll put his arm in a splint. We can't operate today. We'll have to do that. We'll make sure his legs sterilised and just covered in bandages, and we'll operate on that. And then we'll work out what to do with his face later on. So Friday night came. I was in the hospital just lying there thinking, wow, I'm still here. I'm still alive.
And I'm guessing, thank goodness, there wasn't any really worrying internal.
Yeah. Well, what happened with the lady, bless her, was she had to sit in the policeman's car whilst they were determining if I had was going to survive, if I was going to die or what have you. And in the end, she was told, "Oh no, he's fine. He's going to be okay. He's going to have to undergo some operations." So she was released by the police and could go home with her son and everything else. But yeah, it was an interesting time. So Saturday morning came, 8 a.m, straight in the operating theatre. Had something like a 7-hour operation on my arm, where they ended up putting 2 long plates and sewing me up. But because the arm was so swollen, they couldn't actually seal me up properly. So they had to bandage me up, and that would then turn into another operation for a skin graft, and then put the skin graft to cover it and seal it properly. So that was the Sunday operation, and then the Monday operation was just to deal with my face, to deal with my fractured eye socket, and to sort my nose out. So yeah, so by Tuesday morning I'd sort of gone, wow, from riding on my motorbike on Friday lunchtime, or 3 o'clock it was I think at the time, to Tuesday morning having undergone, I think it was something like it was 7 hours, 6 hours and 4 hours of operations. It's like, wow, so what happened?
So how's an excuse for missing a 5 o'clock meeting on a Thursday?
Yeah, absolutely. And from there, it was like, wow, I sort of was lying in my bed, and hospitals are strange places. They're so noisy. It was also a time of year when it was really, really hot, and the ward was boiling hot. And just lying there, I was thinking, wow, I was really lucky. I was really lucky for so many reasons. There could have been a car behind. I could have hit the curb and snapped my neck.
Jesus.
I could have been dead. I could have been paralysed. It could have been anything. And, I sort of didn't know what the damage was. I didn't know if I could walk properly again. They'd said, look, we don't know yet. We need to get you up and about as quick as possible. So my ambition from that point was really... whatever I did next had to have more mission, purpose and legacy. And, it wasn't to be just about, how much money can I make? What can we do that's actually a positive for the world? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying just form a charity, because I think charities do have their place, but sometimes I think they can lose their way and they're not run as well as businesses could be run. So I wanted to do something with more mission, purpose and legacy. But would still have a profitable element behind it. And that really stemmed from me thinking about, perhaps if I had died in my obituary, what would they have put? And the only thing I could actually come up with was that I work a lot, and always have done from a very young age. And it was like, wow, it's not really a great sort of epitaph to turn around and say, he worked a lot and that's it. So, and that's where I look at it being a pivotal moment in my life, whereby I did want to change things, and it does change your perspective, of what do you really need to operate as a human being? What do you really want? Why do you want it? Why does everyone say, I want to have a Ferrari and I want to have a really big house? Why do you want a big house? Or why do you want lots of houses? Because actually all the people that I know that are very, very wealthy and have lots of houses and have lots of possessions, it becomes a headache. It becomes a real headache. And actually, the less you have in life, quite often the happier you are.
Yeah.
And that's why you go to some of the poorest nations of the world, and actually they are genuinely happy, but they have nothing. And for me, that was really an interesting point, thinking, wow, you don't need the amazing material possessions. Actually, in life, what you need is the people around you. You need experiences and balance, and that really was something that delivered in spades from that time.
Sorry, you were...
I've just got 2 quick questions. How long were you in hospital for to recover, and how long was the recovery process, and how long did it take to draw that conclusion that you've just outlined there? Just out of interest.
And third question, just on top of that, was, were you getting any signs of it before the accident as well? So sorry.
Interesting.
Three
So
questions.
3 things. So
Sorry, mate.
I look at everything as a challenge. So I'm always, whatever I'm doing, I always turn it into my own little challenge in my head. So as soon as I was lying in my hospital bed, as soon as the sort of last operation had been done, it's like, right, how quickly can I get better? And how quickly can I get better starts with how quickly can I get out of hospital? And I remember the guy next to me, the nurse kept going to him, "Sir, we have to get you out of bed. You have to get up and move. You have to get out and walk." And he had some minor operation, but he kept refusing to actually move. So then they came to me, and on the Tuesday morning, so they said, "Right, we want you to get out of bed." And I was like, "Really?" And they said, "Yeah, we want you to try and move about." So I got out of bed, and they said, "How does that feel?" I said, "Fine." They said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to do more. I want to do more. I want to do more." And I said to them, "Look, I'm not going to make any bones about it. It's bloody noisy in this place. It's really, really hot. I want to get out as quickly as possible." And they said, "Right, well, we'll help you do that. Obviously, beds are scarce, so we're really keen to hear that from you, and we will help you as much as we can." So they really did give me all the tools, and they kept bringing me out of bed every half an hour, trying to move around, and then gave me a wheelie. I actually got out of there by Thursday night.
Wow.
Did you?
So I actually got out by Thursday night, which was just me being tenacious and just pushing it. And so I actually got out really quickly. I was still in quite a lot of pain, and I was taking painkillers, and they were saying, "Oh, are you in much pain?" No, I'm okay. I just thought I just want to get out. So I eventually got home and was sort of sat there going, "Wow, lucky to be here, and what a change." But true to myself, there was a really important board meeting happening. I think it was the following Tuesday. So we're only talking like just over a week.
Did you go?
So I thought, I know what I'll do is I'll and it was at the RAC club, so you have to have a jacket on as well. So I thought, right, and I go to this board meeting. I didn't tell anyone. I just literally got a taxi to take me all the way there. But I was really slow moving, like really, really slow. And I had my leg in a brace, so that was straight. And to be in a taxi was really uncomfortable. Yeah. So I turned up at this board meeting, and because I booked the taxi and took me door to door, I'd got there early. So I was there, first one there. Everyone walked in and going, "Greg, what on earth? Firstly, have you looked at yourself? What on earth are you doing here?" And
did you take more ketamine?
No, unfortunately not. But they literally let me stay for 2 hours and then booted me out. I said, "No, you've got to go. You've got to go."
Was this a remnant of the mindset of I have to work hard?
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. I can't fail. I can't, especially because of the past and everything. I can't let people down. I've got to keep on going. And the reality is, no, you don't. And it's like, I thought I was so important to the business that it wouldn't be able to run, etc. But the reality behind it is you're not. Everyone who thinks they are fundamental to your business, unless you are a one-man band and you are the person, then obviously you are fundamental to it. But if you're in a company where there is 20, 30, 40 people, then no, anyone can go, anyone's replaceable. And the reality behind it is that, you're not as important as you think. And going back to your question, had I thought about the changing in attitude? And I'd say probably yes. And that stemmed back to the 2008 to 2011 period, where actually you started to understand that the material possessions didn't perhaps matter so much. So I think it was almost like a compounding from God saying, "Well, are you sure you learn? I just want to make sure you get this point really, really well." So from that, it was an amazing lesson. And I think the things I learned is, wow, your body is pretty tough.
Yeah.
And it is resilient. And in terms of recovery, it was painful. There was times when I didn't want to do the physio, and I'm there, and I can remember at one point where I couldn't bend my leg at all, and I just burst into tears. And I was just like, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to walk properly. I'm not sure I'll be able to do this. And then I sort of, after about half an hour of feeling sorry for myself, I thought, oh, for God's sake, there's people that lose their legs. There's people that end up in a wheelchair from this, and just grow up and just man up. So I then just really focused on getting better and really sort of recovering. Had to go back to hospital a few times, had to have stitches out and things checked and x-rays done. But literally within sort of 3 months, I was sort of on my road to recovery. And after 6 months, I was pretty much there. Well, nearly.
And I'm amazed that there was something obviously still in you that not much after a week meant you went to a board meeting. Does that seem ridiculous now, or is that still
Yes.
in
Seems ridiculous. I mean, I cannot believe I did it. I mean, I literally look smashed up.
What did your family say? Did they know that you're going to the board meeting?
Yeah, they know that I'm pig-headed and stubborn and will do my own thing.
Yeah.
And so
They left you to-
I suppose sorry to interrupt. I'm fascinated by the decision process. As in, there's obviously something very deep in you. I don't know if it's something that's changed but it's obviously something very deep in you. Which, and I remember once being in hospital with my son, and he ended up fine. But I remember being on a conference call, sort of really worried about how he was.
Yeah.
Because it was quite serious. I remember he had a really high temperature. I think I can't remember. I've still got pictures of it, but he wasn't right. And he was really young. But I was like, no, I have to take this conference call. And I look back on that and I think, what on earth was I thinking? Why is my wife still with me?
Yeah.
I was like, what was I thinking? And I mean, I couldn't even tell you what the meeting was, but it's amazing how we convince ourselves that these things are that important.
We do. I sort of look at business in a slightly different way as well. And it's like my daughters say, oh, Dad, you don't have any hobbies. And it's like, I do have some hobbies, but I don't have that many hobbies because I am obsessed with business. So I do get involved in lots of businesses. And I look at business as being a bit of a hobby.
Yeah.
And that's why you become really passionate about it and you really sort of live and breathe it. But there is a balance where it's too much.
Yeah.
And you do need to pull back. And I've worked on that ever since. But even now, I work too hard. I work too much. And, people tell me, come on, Greg, you're turning into the old Greg again. And it's like, you do have to step back sometimes. And it's important. And because all those problems that you think you're going to solve that day, they're still going to be there tomorrow. And does it really matter if it's a day or a week? And it's just trying to get some reality behind it. And that's, whenever I'm there at the end of the day saying, oh God, I didn't even start the list I'd written. It's like I try not to beat myself up too much because there is no bigger critic out there than myself.
Yeah.
And that's quite often happens with most people. The biggest critic is always yourself. I heard a saying the other day about whether it's out loud or internally, you talk to yourself a lot. And be kind. Be kind to yourself because you talk to yourself a lot. And you stop and think, yeah, all your inner thoughts, you might be not saying out loud, but you're still talking to yourself. And it's like you can berate yourself in your head.
Absolutely.
And it's like, be kind to yourself because, it's difficult.
And internal dialogue is so important and so key. I remember reading about it when I went through the period of anxiety we talked about earlier on, and it can get into a negative spiral.
Yes.
And negative, it just spirals downwards, and it's about changing that narrative and being positive, but it's not always that easy. But yeah absolutely, it really is key to your whole being and your approach to day-to-day life, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
No, very much so.
And I think you can train it over time, but it's not that easy if you've got negative thought processes.
And I think we're all very, very different. And there are people that have a very positive outlook in life.
Yeah.
I've got one friend who's massively positive, and he should probably be on this podcast. He ended up at one point having 3 primary cancers. And he had them all removed and had to go through chemo, but he did it through positivity. And he believes that his attitude about being positive has helped him massively. Now, not all of us can do that. So, we are all different about the way we're wired and the way we're built. But effectively, it does take time, effort, and I think repetition. Saying, no, I am good enough. I am good enough. I am good enough. And actually, talking about those things out loud. Because you are right. Some of those inner thoughts can just bring you down and down and down. It's like, oh, why did I do that? I'm such an idiot. I'm this, that.
You're swimming upstream rather than, downstream. That's the problem, yeah.
I think what's so complex about that internal dialogue is there also does have to come at some point some element where you actually have to earn the right to improve your own self-perception, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I think I love life coaching. I love audiobooks, podcasts. It winds. Well, some people just aren't into it, right? I love learning every day because I don't think I did enough when I was younger. But it's the challenge, I think, with it is I've never liked the fluffy stuff, which is just think great things.
Yeah.
Because actually, it really is action that drives that sort of starts that cycle. But it's such a hard balance because sometimes someone just needs someone to say everything's going to be all right. But it's I think what's so difficult or so complex about it is it does have to start somewhere. It does have to be some action. I don't know. Again, I think that's why it resonates so much with me. You getting yourself out of that property situation and dusting off and going again, because that sort of internal dialogue isn't easy.
No, it's not. And I think it's just one of those things where you sort of look at it and go, well, if you don't do it, what are you going to do? And the reality behind it is this is where some people then end up homeless and doing all sorts of things.
Exactly.
There are different paths that you can take. But I think for me, resilience is a really important quality that I take very close to my heart. And I feel that I'm a very, very resilient character. And you have to keep on going. And I think that's really probably stems a little bit from my childhood, being a bit of a fighter and carrying on. But ultimately, it's also then trying to get that balance.
Yeah.
So once you are back and there, don't become what you were before and just working all the time. And that's the balance I'm trying to do at the moment. So, taking holiday and when I'm away, actually putting on an out of office, which I did for the first time this year, ever in my life. So, before I'd always be taking calls, I'd always be answering emails and doing everything. And I was always accessible. And I don't think that's a good thing because, as you said earlier, about being in the moment, and that's where I've really struggled throughout my past. And any regret that I've got is not being in the moment because I'm always thinking about what's happening next, what's going on with those problems and issues and stuff. And the reality is, I think it's important to come back and be in the moment.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's funny on the out of office thing. Do you think though, sort of how was that for the people around you at the time? Because by the way, that's exactly what I wouldn't say I do anymore. I used to do, but it is shit for people around you, especially if you're on a holiday where people have different expectations of what a holiday should be. I look back on that and I think again, what was so important that was really, and it probably was, but it's. I guess I'm sort of trying to understand, where do you think that does come from?
I think it's in the belief that you put business as being the be all and end all, and you hear of all these stories about 3 hours sleep, doing everything, always accessible and everything else, and the reality behind it is that's all well and good, but actually A, it's not good for mental health, B, it's not good for the people around you, and C, it isn't normal. I have been called abnormal several times, and it's about trying to basically become more human again.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And to go and do experiences, if you're taking time out to go and have an experience, enjoy the experience. And that's why I try and put my phone away a lot more. And it's like people film concerts through their phone and you sort of look at it and go, why are you doing that? Yeah. Because the reality is you need to see it through your eyes and experience it and not have something held that you're trying to sort something out, people in the way, etc. And I do think we've sort of lost a lot of that. And for me, I'm trying desperately to sort of regain that. And I think that's been quite a challenge, to be honest.
But it also seems to me that you don't actually have a resistance to working hard, as in it's something you actually by choice probably would do happily.
Yes. As
opposed to, dare I say it, with someone like me, I think sometimes I do work very hard, but actually there's a bit of resistance to it. I don't know. But yeah, it seems to me that you don't, it's not that you're necessarily stressed or necessarily not enjoying it. Yeah. And actually, that's quite...
I think it has, if I'm really honest about it, I have almost made it into a hobby. So someone might turn around and go, oh, do you know, I love playing my guitar. I can play my guitar for 4 hours. It just takes me away and everything else. Me, I can go and, you know, if I've got 4 hours, I'll go and do some work. Right. And it's like, it's a really stupid mentality.
Is that your flow state though, where you just
literally, I'll think, oh, okay, I know, I'll go and do that. I know I've got that to do. And part of it is to do with me keeping a mental list. I need to write things down more because you take them from your brain. If you don't write something down, quite often you'll store it in your brain. And I have these lists in my head that are constant, and I need to get them out of there and onto a bit of paper. One of my brothers is brilliant at writing lists. He writes a list every single day of everything he needs to do, anything he didn't do from yesterday, and he's got books going back years. And it's just, and all it is not notes, it's just a list. And he'll cross them off, and I really need to learn from that. And I've tried them before, and I need to push myself, because I like going to the gym, so I like doing that. I like sort of keeping fit, doing classes. I've started to get a bit more into yoga and Pilates now, which I think is a really good thing, especially for my age. And so, you know, I think from there it's important to start trying to do different things as well as just going to your default of, oh, I'm going to go and do some work.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, we take the kids every year, families in the village. We go to the Alps and just spend a week on the snowboard or skis. It's just, I find that it's just
skiing is my big release. That's where I won't be on my phone.
Exactly.
That's where I won't do any emails,
because you have to put the phone away. You're in nature. You're observing the views. You're active.
Yeah, but how ridiculous was it that time where everyone went and took their picture at Mont Blanc, and I was writing a bloody email?
Yeah, we had it. Yeah, exactly.
Sitting here talking about it like, you know, we've all learned. I haven't learned. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, we still do stupid things, but again, don't beat yourself up.
Exactly.
But skiing for me is one of my big releases, and that's where I can really switch off. So I would love to just go and take a chalet for a season, to be honest, and work out there, and then sort of take some time out. I think that'd be really good. But yeah.
So you had this massively impactful event in your life. It changed your outlook, your perception. You realised you didn't need all the material possessions. So what age were you at the accident when that happened, by the way?
I was 42.
42,
yeah. No, sorry, rubbish. 47.
47.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, 47. So.
And I mentioned this on another podcast, but I'm going to mention it again because I find it really interesting. And you're bored of hearing this, but there was a guy on a podcast I heard a few weeks ago, and he said the first half of your life is all about ego, so collecting possessions and buying consumerism and all that kind of stuff. The second half is about soul, so stripping down all the stuff you don't need, focusing on other people, and the average turning point for that is 47.2, and that blew my mind.
Wow.
Because I'm 47, but I just feel in the last... it's been coming a while, but I just think that's such an interesting concept that's been alien to me, and without realising it, that's what's happening. It's really interesting that you said you were 47, and you're already drawing that conclusion anyway. But that was the killer moment.
Yeah, that was
not literally.
Not literally. But
that's the terrible.
Yeah, it was the moment.
No pun intended.
Where it did sort of a bit of a wake up call. If you speak to my kids today, they'll both say, "Oh, Dad still works too hard,"
really?
And it's, I think, partly because I get involved in other businesses as well, where I'm not directly responsible, but I do want to sit down and do some bits and pieces on it. And I think one of the things I'm really, really bad at is saying, no, sorry, I haven't got time to do that. So I'll always say yes. And then it's like, right, I've got to do that, I've got to do that. Yeah. And it's one of those things that I'm getting better at and starting to push back on and say, actually, no, you can do that bit and you do that bit. And I think my control freak is getting a little bit whittled down, which is good. So I can now push jobs out a lot more, which is good.
Saying no to stuff like driving 2 hours to record a podcast, But exactly. I've lost my train of thought now. I was going to get into something else. But so we talked about the pivotal turning point. That was it. You mentioned earlier on, which I thought was really interesting. I think it was a job where you siphoned off the company, half of it was products, half of it was software. And I think you said at the time there was no real tangible output of that business.
Yeah.
And then you moved into helping small businesses and you were getting a thanks for that. And obviously now you're in the world of making a big difference in sustainability, which has a tangible output as well. Is that something that's kind of shaped and driven where you are today with Scoot?
Yeah, very much so. I think lying on my hospital bed, I thought, right, whatever I do, I want more mission, legacy, purpose. And I had absolutely no idea what on earth that looked like. If someone had told the younger Greg, oh, you're going to be involved in sustainability, he would have scoffed and laughed, to be totally honest and transparent. And I didn't really stop and think about climate change in the world and putting rubbish in the bin or anything like that. It never really resonated with me. And Scoot came about through my eldest daughter, really. She passed a driving test, which is an interesting time for her, a scary time for any parent. And she'd been driving a week and she was going to the cinema. And effectively, she didn't come home. And, I'm texting her, calling her, trying to find out what's going on. Anyway, she gets in at like 5:30am after going to the pictures with her mates at like 7 o'clock. And what transpired was she had been doing lifts through Snapchat. And people had been asking her and saying, oh, can you do a lift? And she's driving around. So the next day we had a conversation about it. And she goes, well, I earn £85. And I was like, okay, is that legal? She said, I don't know. Not really bothered. Young person, don't care. And I said, but how do your friends contact you? Oh, through Snapchat. I said, how many friends you got? She goes, oh, about 650. I was like, where's the security and protection? It was just crazy. So I came up with this idea and I thought, what we'll do is we'll create an app that is for friends to share journeys together. And we came up with the name Scoot, and we'll actually have the position to remove the number of cars on the road, reduce congestion and reduce pollution. And in fact, for every journey that we do, we'll plant a tree to remove the carbon footprint of that journey. So actually it becomes a whole carbon positive operation. So we raised some money, and Millie, my daughter, was involved in the business, help sort of forming the idea and the product. And then we went live and we had this brilliant like Uber app for friends, and you could do instant rides. So your friend could be at home and you could ask them to pick you up and take you to somewhere else, or you could do shared journeys. And we went and got barrister's opinion, and it got really complex. If I look back, we should have had an MVP that was really simple, really easy. We created something that was massively
That's
complex.
what I would have told you to do, for sure.
Yeah, we literally created an Uber for friends, and in fact we got patents in Canada and the US.
Wow.
And it almost became the reverse of Uber, whereby you choose your driver, because you could be your best friend or it could be other friends you know, and then you had levels in the back end. So for me to order you and you to give me a lift, I must have your mobile number in my phone and you must have mine in yours. And then we had another level of friends, so your friends' contact must be in there, or we had another level that's totally open and you could choose the levels. And it was a great product. It was a really good product, and we launched in March 2020.
Right.
But March 2020, we went into lockdown.
Why?
So, we're then in lockdown, and I'm like, oh, how long is this lockdown? The year 2020 was a very strange year for everybody. You speak to anyone today and it's like, it's a year that I just can't really describe what I did, what happened, anything. And, the fact that we all went into lockdown for such a long period of time is quite surreal. But we went into lockdown and we're like, what can we do? So we could shelve the company or sit and wait. But how long
what stage were you at? So it sounds like you didn't do.
So we'd raised like £1.5 million, possibly a bit more by then, and we'd created this app, and we had probably a team of 10. And
again, you did the development in-house.
Yeah, in-house development.
Out of interest, why have you always gone in-house?
I've done some other developments where we have gone offshore, and it's always been a nightmare.
Okay.
It's always been a nightmare. So I sort of avoided offshore. And I do now a bit of offshore, but mix it in with in-house as well.
Okay. So that's what my company does. So
okay, we'll have to talk more.
Yeah, so when I say I would have said an MVP, it's really core to what we advise is just that
basic
50, 100k, just get something really, really basic. But anyway, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, definitely. But we created this amazing product. And so we applied to an Innovate UK competition about how can you help during and post-COVID. And we came up with the idea of adding in a feature called errands, whereby you could ask up to 10 friends or family in your network to pick up your click and collect shopping or pick up a subscription or run an errand for you if you're having to self-isolate. And it was really, again, quite advanced in as much as it would send it out to 10 people. As soon as one person accepted it, it'd let the other 9 people know. And then you could ask for it within the next 2 hours or end of day. So you might have been passing. So the person would then press the button saying, right, I'm on the errand. And then you on the receiver could see where they were in their journey, see them go and picking it up and see them at your door. You wouldn't need to open the door. They take a picture of it and then say errand completed. And then it was all done. And so we won 75,000 with Innovate UK.
Fantastic.
And we implemented that, and we undertook about 4,000 errands during COVID, which was really good.
Fantastic, yeah.
So it was great. We sort of came in and out of COVID. I remember December 2020, we came out, and then we went back into lockdown in 21, and it was like, oh God, what do we do? So when we fully came out, we're looking at the car sharing app and thinking, right, what should we do? So we got some interesting people on board and said, look, you should perhaps look at corporate. A lot of people quite often share journeys to work. This can be a bit more formalised, and it shares the cost all in the app. So payment was built in there, everything was built in there. And corporates were a bit hesitant to recommend people to share journeys in case they caught COVID. We don't mind you catching COVID on public transport, but if you catch it through...
Dime,
So we sort of carried through 2021 looking at ideas. And towards the end of the year, we're sort of looking at parking the idea of the car sharing app and saying, right, okay, what is our heart? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? And we sort of said, well, we want to help climate change. We know climate change is a massive problem. It's getting worse and worse and worse. It is accelerating. You've got so much plastic in the world as well. We're losing 10 billion trees a year, which is roughly the size of Portugal. It's about a football pitch every 1 or 2 seconds. And I want to start trying to help educate people, help them understand that as an individual, you can make a difference. Climate change is not the problem of China, BP and Shell. Those 3 entities make products, and they make products for us. It's us as consumers that are the problem. And everyone goes, oh no, it has to be led by business, it has to be led by the countries, it has to be led by government. No, I disagree. It has to be led by us as consumers. We need to lead the way. China would have a better climate record if they actually exported all of their greenhouse gas emissions with their exports, and Britain would not be at the 2% of emissions, would be much higher. So the reality is it's about understanding carbon footprints, where they are delivered, and that actually we are responsible for them. And I think that's a message that I've been trying to push. And we can't buy our way out, I totally agree, but we do need to do a blend of everything. We do need to try and modify our behaviour. So perhaps fly a bit less, perhaps, have holidays within the UK, perhaps look at just the way we live, turn down the thermostat, turn off the lights, turn off the tap. It does make a difference. People go, oh, I can't do anything. It's like, you really can. It does make a difference. And, I think, unfortunately, we are slightly media-led, though, because we do have climate change activists pushing the mantra about just stop oil, which, there are some things that you look at and think they have a point on certain elements. But the aviation industry, for example, represents 2.7% of greenhouse gas emissions. The food waste is 6%, so twice as much as the whole aviation industry. Yeah. But because the media pushes the agenda of, flying is really bad, everyone stop flying, that's the only thing we look to do. But in reality, it's not. In the whole scheme of things, we need to do so much more. And I think from that perspective, we need to be a little bit more educated about what creates carbon. And, even going out for dinner creates carbon. And it's like, do something about it. And this is why we've got these products that are really simple. So there's an eco contribution added to your bill that's just 50p a cover that looks to plant a tree, buddies it with a carbon credit to do the work of removing the carbon footprint, the trees for the benefit of the planet, and then showcasing it through the QR code on the bill. So actually the diner can actually look at their tree being planted as opposed to just thinking, oh, was it planted? And it, instead of becoming a passive donation, actually becomes something that you look at and actually think, oh, I feel good about that. That's my tree. And you can even watch your tree grow by adding your email and having your own impact profile. So suddenly it's giving value back.
Yeah, it's a massive difference, isn't it? Seeing something tangible.
Yeah, and that for me is the really important thing about how do we bring it to life and make people firstly learn about it, learn where their tree's being planted, learn what a tree does. How do we remove plastic? And actually, how does it help the poorest demographic in the world? These people, we've created thousands of employment days from not only planting trees, but also finding plastic on the beaches, sourcing it, sorting it, and getting it back in the supply chain. So actually reducing the production of brand new plastic. And it's things like that that are really powerful, all blended together. And there's no one quick answer. People go on about carbon offsets being bad, and carbon capture is the way forward. I disagree. It's a blend of everything. Most carbon capture projects are first world projects, so they do not have the social aspect of helping the poorer communities. We've got some amazing cook stove projects that we support that are led by women that are doing some amazing projects, and we've got some real good technology about biodigesters. Quite often in India, families will share a cow, and they can put the manure in the biodigester that's then linked up to their cook stoves, and they can cook indoors without burning wood. There's still over 3.8 billion people today that burn indoors with wood, which causes smoke inhalation and eye disease.
I was going to say, isn't that something like 5%? It's some awful percentage about child cancer in India or something is caused how they heat, how they cook.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So it's all these projects that I think do an amazing positive impact. So, I think it should be a mixture of carbon offsets, carbon removal, modifying our behaviour, looking at natural reduction. So it is a blend of everything. I don't think you can turn around and say, oh no, we must just focus on modifying our behaviour and reduction, because it'll take too long. You can't get to zero. You cannot modify your behaviour to zero today. It's impossible. And, carbon capture is not scalable at the moment. It's too expensive. So this is why we do have to do this blend of everything. And for me, I'm really passionate about it because we all can do something, and it doesn't cost a huge amount. If I come to you at the end of the year with a bill for £200, you're not going to want to pay it. But if there's a 50p here on your restaurant bill, if there's £1 on your hotel bill, if you go to an event at a stadium and there's 50p on your parking and there's 5p on your plastic bottle of water, you're not going to mind. And that for me, as long as it's showcased to you and it shows value about how that value is derived, then that I think is the thing that's really important. And there was an article in the paper the other week talking about another company who's planting a tree and adding it to the bill. They don't really showcase it properly and they don't really talk about it properly, and it got a little bit slated, and it made me really disheartened by the journalists. So I am going to contact them. But they were sort of making a bit of a mockery out of it, sort of saying, oh, profiteering, this, that and the other, greenwashing, everything else. And it's like, no, I'm sorry, I disagree.
Yeah.
I disagree. It's like your carbon footprint really is yours. And if you didn't go to that restaurant, that carbon footprint would not be created. The restaurant already has its own carbon footprint that it should be looking to offset and remove and reduce. But for me, it's really important about taking ownership of your own carbon footprint and being aware of what it is. And anyone that says, oh, I've got a really low carbon footprint, I don't go out, I've got solar on the roof, I recycle my water, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. You're not being asked to pay the eco contribution because you're not incurring it. And I think that becomes fair as well. So suddenly it becomes equitable. So if you want to fly a lot and you don't want to modify your behaviour, then there is an eco contribution on it.
Yeah.
And you pay for it. And then people go, oh yeah, but you're buying your way out. That's wrong. You should just look at reduction. No, I'm sorry. It's the balance of doing it all. And we have to do it all together because we don't have much time.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, so how does the business model work of the business?
So what we do is we work with NGOs across the world, and these are amazing NGOs, companies or businesses like Eden Reforestation, who have planted 1 billion trees since 2004. And basically we partner with them, and we have a set site. So we turn around and we commit for the next 2 years, paying a set amount, so they know that they can employ this number of staff and offer employment days. And then we make a margin on that. So we are B Corp ourselves, so we've been awarded Best for the World in corporate governance and transparency, so we're in the top 5%. So we make sure our margins are around 15% and everything else is reinvested.
Fantastic.
Excuse me, I remember the powerful video that you showed me about the lady that had been given a job in Mombasa planting trees. She'd been with, lost her husband, and she had a lot of kids. And,
6 children. Her husband had died, unfortunately. She couldn't feed them. And so she relocated the family to where Eden were operating and basically became a tree planter. And this video shows her not only feeding her children, they're all doing their homework. She sends them all to school. And that for me is amazing, because the only way you can break poverty is really through education. It's not through charity, it's not through giving anything, it's actually through education. So she was so proud that she had come back from the abyss, and now all of her children were not only being fed but doing homework as well, which is amazing. And that's where I think, we look in this country where, schooling's sort of slated a lot, but it's free. And it's like these countries that have nothing, they have to pay something to send their children to school. How lucky are we?
Yeah, no, I'm really grateful for all I've learned from you and your amazing company over the last 18 months. I've learned a lot, and I've always wanted to make a difference, not really know what to do about it. Kind of thought maybe it's up to big businesses to make the difference, but it's been a really good journey for me to understand all of that. Little things. One thing that always resonates or stands out in my mind, I think it was either you or Strings that had mentioned the fact that on the bottom of all the emails you get the big graphic that says, please do not print this email. And that actually has more damage than, because it's a site in itself and it has to be stored on the servers, and people blast that all over their emails, and that actually has an impact in itself on
people forget that emails can be anything up to 50 grams depending upon the attachment. So I remember having a conversation with someone that says, I don't know what to do, I've done everything I can, I do recycle my water, I don't go out for dinner, I have renewable power, I've got solar on the roof. I said, how many emails have you got in your inbox? He said, I'm a bit bad at that. I've got about 30,000 emails. I said, well, look, that's where you can start next, because that has a carbon footprint. Yeah. And, it's difficult. Some people are really organised. One of my friends is so organised he doesn't have anything in his inbox, and there's others that have lots in their inbox. Yeah. I'm trying to get better.
I remember seeing a stat once that says something like, if someone shares a high quality, high definition video, it's equivalent to everyone in Newcastle sending a text message or something like that. It was ridiculous. And of course now all the kids are spending all their time watching videos. So,
Well, that's why we try and, within everything we do, we try and contextualise it. So say, that's equivalent to 2 hours on Netflix, that's equivalent to an hour on TikTok, and just try and bring it into reality about, okay, that's interesting, I didn't know that. And just to help people try and understand a little bit more about, carbon footprints and why is it important.
So I'm going to play slight devil's advocate here. And this is not reflective of my view, but one thing that we both are suckers for is Twitter, X. And with all of these types of issues, I try and get as much from both sides as I can. Yeah. What would you say to a lot of the rhetoric out there at the moment? Because I don't know if you've seen it, but I certainly have a real growing of climate sort of cynicism, skepticism. I've been pretty strict vegan, for example, for 8-9 years, loosened off a little bit. Big part of that was around climate, but again, you try and look at the best data you can see. But okay, hold on, what would you say to that?
I think there's again the balance. I mean, there is definitely greenwashing that happens, and I think the Guardian pointed out a project that was run by Vera that they said that the baseline had been wrong and this, that and the other, and they did attack it pretty heavily.
Yeah.
And I think there is some justification behind it, but in some ways it then becomes self-auditing, so you correct it. It's important not to kill it, because things like the carbon projects for forests, for example, are really, really important. And they do help the indigenous people and population there as well. So there is some skepticism around it, but I think you do have to turn around and say, look, it's with all of society, there's an element of bad. It's a small element, and it quite often dictates the narrative, but the majority is good. And that applies to things like carbon credits. It applies to things like electric cars. You have all the people going, oh, what's the carbon footprint of building that lithium battery? Yeah. What about the terrible pictures that you see of the kids mining and stuff? And it's like, I guarantee there will be some of that.
Yeah.
But it'll be, again, probably the minority piece. And the majority of it will be from good sources. Now, I think technology will catch up with some things, because there's still the issue of what in the hell do we do with electric cars when they end of life? So how do we make them repurposed? So there's a lot of questions unanswered. Sometimes we do put all our eggs in one basket a bit too much.
Yeah.
We've focused on electric cars. If we all wanted electric cars tomorrow, it'd take about 30 years, because there's not enough lithium ion in the world, and we still want to build computers and phones. Things like hydrogen, I think, have been missed a little bit. We're now starting to catch up a little bit. We're looking at hydrogen cars, certainly hydrogen planes. I think, unfortunately, the hydrogen bomb, everyone starts going, it's going to blow things up. Well,
I guess it's a bit like nuclear energy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's about having an open mind, taking both sides and saying, look, there are arguments from both sides. And it's like, people like Greta, okay, I understand you'll only travel by boat. Unfortunately, we don't all have the luxury of 3 weeks to get somewhere. And actually, the rhetoric of all flying's bad. Well, if everyone stopped flying tomorrow, how many, we'd have hundreds of thousands of people lose their jobs. It's not only the pilots
Absolutely.
and the air stewardess, it's the knock-on effect of so many businesses. So the reality behind it is being too excessive on either way. So turning around and saying, oh no, we can do what we like, we'll buy our way out, that's wrong. So on the other side, saying, oh, everyone stop flying, and that's wrong as well. And it is about the balance. Life is always about balance. And I think if we as individuals can try and be mindful, so whenever we're thinking about throwing things away, it's in the back of your mind. And I think that is happening more and more. People think, oh, hang on, is that recycling? And is that? And so it is about trying to balance it up and looking at both sides. But there are definitely arguments where things do happen. It is greenwashing and total bullshit. And there's others that actually are genuine. And it's just trying to sort of unmuddy the waters, if you like. I mean, what we do in our own business is we speak to a lot of the project operators directly that offer carbon credits. So we understand the projects, we look at the baselines, we do our own calculations as well. We're looking at ratings agencies.
So understanding what really makes a difference, what really is tangible, what shifts the
100%.
Yeah.
And then, we've been invited out to places to actually go and see these projects in action as well, which I want to do next year, because I think it's really important to see it on the ground. And it is not only the carbon aspect, it is also the social aspect about how you're actually helping people. And I think that's a good thing, because we sit in this country in our luxury, and it is luxury. If you have a roof over your head, that is luxury. I'm sorry, it is, compared to people who have to walk 5 miles to get water.
Yeah.
So, the reality is, it's like if you can help people across the world through doing something simple that's very, very affordable. If you're out to dinner already, to add on 50 pence, it doesn't matter if you're in Pizza Express, you should be able to afford 50 pence.
Absolutely. I always pronounce his second name wrong. Bjorno Longo or Bjorno Longbard. He's a climate specialist, and he takes a very similar view to you, which I really appreciate. Which is, yes, we do need to act quickly. Yes, it is important, but actually we probably have the time to sort of take a realist, pragmatic approach, but also understanding the data of what actually makes a difference.
Yeah.
Or what actually, and I think what I've loved about what you've said is, it's such a simplistic idea. You do this, we plant a tree. And I think that's the thing with the climate for a lot of people. I think it's so abstract.
Yeah.
And I think that, and for me, I often talk about, rather than climate, my view is almost environmentalism, because it's things like, again, you see different data on how much do cows and methane really make a difference.
Yeah.
But the one thing I can guarantee is that a mass, what's the word that they use in America? But those huge mass farming. I don't care what that does to the climate. You're telling me that isn't having a runoff onto the environment.
Yeah.
There's you can't argue with that part.
Yeah. And also into the people. I mean, exactly, it's been proven already that the sort of antibiotics and everything else is causing issues.
Yeah.
And I sort of look back, if you go back to your parents' days when you did have a greengrocer and a fishmonger and a butcher, and you did have the brown paper bag, although brown paper bags aren't that recyclable as well. So there are issues with that, but they're still better than all the plastic there is today. And you sort of look at it and go, we've got this very intensive farming. I mean, we've lost loads of our hedgerows.
That's the word I was looking for, intensive. Yes.
Yeah, intensive farming. We've lost a lot of our hedgerows in the UK because the tractors were too big. So they took hedgerows out to make the fields bigger and more intensively farmed, which has a knock-on effect of nature and wildlife and everything else. So from that point of view, we do need to stop and take stock and stop trying to squeeze so much out of everything. And it's just this fast-paced life, and that for me is something that I try and help educate on as well. Just saying, look, effectively, A, you can make a difference. B, you can try and support more sustainable projects. Although saying that, if you're a single mum of three, then you're going to buy that £2.50 chicken from Tesco. Yeah. And it's hard to balance, but you can sort of try and support where you can. If you can afford it, then you should. And there is a lot of people that can afford it. And the reality is that if you are actually out at something or flying or at a hotel, then yes, you should opt to pay that little bit extra. Yeah. And you shouldn't have the attitude of, oh, they've got enough money already. It's your footprint that you're trying to remove, and own it. Don't shy away from it. Own it. And there's lots of people that talk saying, oh yes, I'd do something, and then in reality, if you ask them to opt in, they won't do it. And that's why I say to any business, look, add it to the bill. If they're really unhappy about it, they'll ask for it to be removed. But add it to the bill so it is there. And then you can talk about it and showcase it. And there's either a business card in the wallet or it's printed the QR code in the receipt. And the same at hotels. At a hotel the other day in London, and actually it was really good because they said, we add on a 5%, which is a lot, 5% service charge, and it's like £30. And I said, yeah, that's great. And they said it covers staff gratuity, sustainability. And I said, that's brilliant. Great. Now, what would have made it that one step better is having a QR code so I can actually look at it in my own time and bring it to life, as opposed to, oh yeah, that's fine. Because I think what happens is if people say yes and it just becomes this one-off donation, they forget about it. If it's brought to life, it's like, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, did you see this? I stayed at this hotel and then, look, this is what I've done. I've now planted a tree.
Yeah, absolutely.
To the point where I'd love to create almost like a air miles for good. So actually you can put on your social channels, right, I've now planted 500 trees and removed 10,000 plastic bottles, and this is great, and have leaderboards and gamify it. And I think that's when you start getting buy-in.
It's a tangible output, isn't it, for that, rather than just being a throwaway. As you well know, I think we've planted over 600 trees now from our instance just at our lab in Reading, which is really cool.
No,
I think we need another podcast to go into the green stuff more deeply another time, because I feel like we've...
we do need to add to our footprint, and
we do
get our table, don't we?
We're a little bit late,
but
I'll plant a tree for each of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess, no, I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah, it's a shame to end, but I think...
I just want to say thank you very much for giving you time today, Greg. You've driven all this way, and we've spent a long time chatting through, which has been brilliant, by the way. It's been really insightful. It's been a really transparent and emotional look at your... It's been a roller coaster, and it's some highs and obviously lows throughout that time as well. So thank you for your honesty and taking us through that. I think I learned a lot, and there's some really key points we can pull out of that. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and really enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, I echo that. I think thanks for being so honest as well, because I think people hearing, you know, stories like that, you know, so much. Well, I've learned a huge amount, but it's it's really inspirational. I think you said the right word, which I don't think is used enough, is resilience. My brother and I, we share a love of the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, just for that very reason, just because it's such a great character trait to teach kids to, you know, well, all of us. Really enjoyed that. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So real, are you crushing up another pill? Let's never ever go to sleep again. Wait, I think I'm starting to fade again. I don't want the end.